All right. We are live here for another candidate interview. We've got Mr. Gil Isbell in the house. Guys, we're going to talk through the same stuff we've been talking through with all the candidates. Mr. Isbell has offered up answers to the questions that we've got, and we've got those posted on the interwebs. So go check out at advancedetowah.com and hit election 22 and check out all the candidate profiles. But that's what we're going to be talking about. So, guys, when you're watching this down the road, if you want to skip on ahead, I'm going to start a timer like I have been. And if you want to skip the pleasantries, then by all means skip on ahead, and we'll get rolling into the meat and potatoes here in just a minute. Let me throw that clock on, and let me ask you, if you do have any questions, go ahead and throw those in the comments. And, of course, hit that like and share button, and let's get some folks on if you don't mind. Also, if somebody could make a comment and let us know that you can hear us. So with that, I will say, how are you this afternoon?
Doing well, Michael. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you for coming in. I know this has been a contentious year for a lot of us in the community, and I'm glad to finally have an opportunity to sit down. I'm honest, I'm a little sad that we haven't been able to really kind of sit down and talk through some of this, and talk, 6, 7, 8, 12 months ago. But anywho's, we're here today, and we'll jump through the core issues. So are you happy to be at least done temporarily with Montgomery, and you've been down there? I know that y'all go down there and just party. Andrew was in here yesterday saying just how chill. It's like a vacation. You go down to Montgomery and barely work.
I'm not sure where he's going, but I tell you what, it's nose to the grindstone. You get a lot done. You enjoy your relationships that you make, that I've made the last 4 years. A lot of great people are there. And I use the old adage, 85% of the folks are great, 10% you could take or leave, and 5% you wish they weren't there, but they were either elected or they're employed there or they're working as a lobbyist. But I tell you what, overall, I've been pleasantly surprised. When I first went down there,
Mm-hmm.
I had these visions of like a Washington, and it's nothing like that. It's a cohesive, good directional way of, and it's not perfect by any means, because you've got the legislature, you have the work staff, and you have the lobbyists.
Right.
And in the House, we have, 105 members when we're full. Right now, we're short a few. Unfortunately, we lost a member not too long ago. He passed away. Becky's seat is not filled yet. But in the end, the legislature's good. But with the lobbyists, they help educate us. And I always thought the lobbyists would be bad, but actually, they work for clients. But a good lobbyist will tell you what they're doing, who they represent, and they'll say, this is the other side. And usually you work together with both sides, or if there are three sides, you work with them and move forward. And the work staff is great. They really are. 90% of them.
Well, you paint a rosy picture. So unfortunately, it's politics, and I can't imagine it's all that rosy. But
Hey,
that's right. It is what it is. And like you said, I know worse. If we really want to talk about perfection, I've said we need to step into a church, and that's where we need to have the conversation about how to get people to work perfectly together. Certainly not gonna resolve those issues in politics. So
now, Michael, you realize, talking about church, that's one of the most political entities.
Oh, I know,
that you can get in.
I know. And if a church has got the political issues that it does, I'm with you. I just mean we got to get into church to talk about how to actually get perfect people. not that that's going to happen.
That's right.
And that's the whole point. That's the whole point. So, guys, thank y'all. Michael, I appreciate you telling me that the audio and video is great. We've been doing this long enough now that you answered my question before I even asked it. Don't want to do these and nobody hears it. So, but again, hit that like button and share it up. Tag somebody that you think might be interested in this conversation. And if you do have a question, by all means, throw it out there, and we'll try and get to it. But we're going to stick with the same format that we've been going through. We're going to start off. We'll talk some about the rendering plant. I'd prefer not to have an hour-long conversation about the rendering plant, but there's no. I'm gonna the elephant in the room. You've certainly been a little more, I guess, for lack of better words, contentious in the discussion as far as Advanced Etowah. And some of the take from the opposition, versus some of the other politicians. I'm not necessarily saying that in a good or a bad way. It just is what transpired. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that and see what's going on there. So let's get rolling. All right. So got Gil Isbell here, House Representative running for re-election. This would be your second term? Second term. So what I want to start out with, like I've started with everybody, give me kind of the quick version outside of politics. Who is Gil Isbell? And what do we need to know, again, outside of politics?
Okay. Grew up in Gadsden, went off to school, got out of school, and then I moved to Atlanta, Charlotte, then Colorado, moved back here. I was gone for about 25 years. And I moved back because my father's furniture store, Isbell and Hallmark, he needed some help. He was getting up in the years, and it was a difficult time. So I came back and helped, and actually within 5 years, we turned around and closed the store because things were very hard on the retail side.
Gotcha.
But I'm married, been married 12 years, have a 12-year-old daughter. She goes to Gadsden Middle. My wife has the Stone Market. Let's see, in the community, I'm on the Salvation Army board. I'm very involved in Kiwanis. I've held every position you can. I actually run the flag program, or try to, amongst everything else I do. I'm administrative board chair at the First United Methodist Church of Etowah. I'm also involved with a couple other organizations as well. And actually, people came to me 4 years ago because they saw that I had a passion for the community and trying to help it. So that I'd never been in politics prior to that.
Okay. All right. So our girls actually went through. They endured Year Brown together.
That's right.
Now we're over on the Rainbow Middle side of things, but still not a very big community.
That's right.
One of the great things about Gadsden and from moving all over, and I'm assuming you've kind of seen the same thing. If you've bounced around, I always say. It's a community you feel like you can know everybody, but at the same time you don't know everybody. Because I've been in some communities where you literally know everybody, and that's also not. It has its downsides,
advantages and disadvantages.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming in and chatting. This has been a weird year. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Some different stuff. I think it's pretty cool. That we've got a number of folks, Kapow and Andre Huff. You've got multiple avenues that help people get information. I know you've been on Kapow a couple of times, and I encourage people go watch what you've talked about over there. All of this for me is about trying to help people get to know and understand each of the candidates. As we go through this process, whether it's, you're watching here or wherever, I certainly would love to see as a social media manager, as a marketer, I'd love to see all of you guys do a lot more on your own and talking, but I get it. Some folks, it's not it's not their cup of tea. So it's again, I appreciate you coming in, and I think it's pretty cool that we've got this much going on in our community now. All right. I appreciate a couple of questions. I'll mark those. We're probably going to save them and pull that stuff in. I'll read here in just a second. But let's get started with the again, the ugly elephant in the room, the rendering plant, and what's transpired, and what is continuing to transpire. While everyone can kind of, I definitely am comfortable saying, breathe a sigh of relief. The rendering plant from what occurred, it has become a catalyst that highlighted a lot of issues in an extreme manner that we have in our community, and certainly handled different ways by different folks. But there's no beating around the bush in what you're putting out with your campaign, and what you've answered the questions about working with folks, if you're okay with the term, behind the scenes.
Sure.
One of the things that really concerns me and concerns a lot of people, and again, that's been brought to the forefront of this behind the scenes, closed door conversation, there, and I hope everyone can understand whether it's true or not true, the way things are handled in the way it came about. People are scared because if you watch the way most things come into this community, it's put out there sometimes for no public conversation, and then approved, brought in, and there's a lot of perception and fear, and I hope it's understandable, that this thing, it was going to come in, that it might have been handled that same way, and a lot of that comes from closed door conversations and not having stuff being done in the public. So who did you talk to? What did you talk to them about? And how did that relate, to what you're saying is working to end, to bring this rendering plant to resolution?
The rendering plant was brought to my attention in November of 20. The week after it was brought up, anyway, I got COVID. Ended up in the hospital about a week later. Stayed in the hospital for 8 days and got out. And during that time, the conversation was really gaining a lot of traction. It was like a snowball.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as things moved on, I was talking with people on the city council. I actually talked with people at Pilgrim's Pride. I was trying to learn about what this subject was, because I had never heard of it before.
Right.
So as time progressed, people were saying, all right, there was that first meeting. Well, my constituents, as I've said earlier, they're on both sides. They were for, they were against. Now, rather full-heartedly for, they just didn't think it was as bad as things were made out to be. Whether right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But who I'm representing are the constituents. So I sat there listening. I didn't get on the bandwagon and protest and say, no, we can't have this.
Mm-hmm.
So, but during the time, I was talking to people in the city of Gadsden. I was talking to people on the opposition side. I was also in time talking with people on the airport authority. I talked with people on the IDA because I'm trying to educate myself what's going on. So in the end, people say I didn't have anything to do with it. Well, my strength are relationships. You talk to the people at Montgomery. We actually have some really big things that should be coming to light, whether it's before the primary or after the primary, but there's some really good things. But I can't talk about it because those are things that are evolving and coming into place. So my relationships with these people allowed me to talk to them. And in the end, I basically told them, this is so divisive. If it comes here, there will be lawsuits delaying it for years. If we do this, it's still going to cause a divide like the Red Sea. Parting people where we didn't, because I know a lot of people that were friends, they don't speak anymore, and that's a shame.
Yeah, that's definitely a shame.
along the way, I was asked what my opinion was. It wasn't my opinion because it's what my constituents think. I have my own personal idea of what was right and what was wrong. But the bottom line is my constituents, and I talked to hundreds and hundreds of folks. And through all this time, I always said, I support my constituents and stand by the people of Etowah County. Well, not getting out there and protesting, I was hammered a lot. But as an elected official, is it my job to jump on a podium and start? I've actually had to educate a lot of the folks that were doing that. I've told them, I said, do you know why they wanted to be here? Do you know why they wanted to put it where they did? Whether right, wrong, or indifferent, and whether I agreed with them or not, I was still listening to everybody. Mm-hmm. I even told a constituent, I'll never forget, I said, if I came back as Jesus Christ and I told you that there was nothing wrong with what was planned, would you believe it? They said, I wouldn't believe it, and a lot of other people wouldn't believe it.
Well, we can certainly, I'll make the point as we talk about church, Jesus Christ wouldn't have done that. Not because of one way or the other, but because he came for a much bigger picture than a rendering plan.
I know, but it was just.
I understand what you're saying. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that would have been a good use, or could have been a good use? I'll take all of the politics and all the yelling and screaming, all the protesting aside. Do you think, doing something like that would be a good use of the airport for economic development?
Personally, no.
All right. Well, that's good, because that was certainly, as a aviation guy, and I think a lot of people have gotten a lot smarter on the aviation world through this process, which is certainly a win from a lot of us that have been around the airport. That resource out there is, people just, if you don't know aviation, it's really hard to fathom how incredible
I actually worked at the Atlanta airport, and I worked at the Charlotte airport.
Okay.
I dealt with real estate. I dealt with noise issues, noise abatement. So I understand a lot of those subjects.
Yes. I quite honestly, and this is just my personal opinion, through all the conversation, just the very concept to being willing to sell that much property, or even consider selling that much property at an airport like that, is crazy to me. You don't have to comment on that. Okay. But that, that just seems very, because once that's done, that's done. And, mm-hmm. If we are willing to sell it, then I would imagine Delta or Southwest Airlines, or fill in the blank, large aviation company, would probably be more than happy to have that much access to a 1,600-foot long runway. So I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not I only know what I know in the aviation world. So, all right. Well, so, the concern of the way that thing, what is claiming that it was ended. We've got Ken Robertson, who certainly didn't come from the opposition, who's an experienced attorney, aviator. He got on that board, and when all of this transpired, when they ended up voting down the proposal, he has come out and made the statement that he feels like they violated the law, that they violated the Open Meetings Act. And then subsequently he claimed that he'd been threatened. But even before getting into the discussion of really whether they were threatened or not, is that concerning to you at all, that you've got that type of thing being stated, from a board member who, I really, perceivably, he's got nothing to gain from saying that. I don't know. If you go back and look, he really was kind of completely unaware of all the opposition stuff that was going on.
I think you would have been having to hide under a rock with a 10-ton boulder on top.
I think if you go look at some of Ken's posts, as I mean, he spends a lot of time down at the beach. I think, from what I've seen, I had no idea. I mean, I still barely know him, have only interacted with him. So, I mean, but it is that. I mean, again, is that concern? So we're talking about the process. That word has been used to the nth degree in all of this kind of stuff, and I'm just curious if you have any concern about the process with which this has been handled from the government side. Obviously, we can have concerns about how it's been handled by citizens, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's start from the beginning. When it was brought in, I know that some people found out because they applied for a permit, ADM permit. So that brought it to light. That's where things started gaining traction. And again, I'm not going to talk about the process because I don't know how each step of the process. However, as an economic developer, and we've passed laws that basically not protect them, but it keeps it quiet because, and I'll use an example. When Google went up to Jackson County, they bought a piece of property. And I know somebody that was in the car with some of the executives. And the executives said, if we hear about this before we make our announcement, we're not buying it. We're not coming here. So and it's kind of the same way here to a certain extent. They had to get their ducks in a row. I fault Pilgrim's Pride for starting what they did because I think things would have gone a better process if that had not have happened. And I don't think that they couldn't vote in. They were going to have public hearings because of ADM's involvement with other people's involvement. Now, that's my opinion. Would it have happened? I can't guarantee that. Right. So,
well, and we've talked through. I mean, obviously, this all started. We're talking about NDAs and all, and nobody's argued that's not appropriate. And particularly when we talked about private land acquisition, that's very inappropriate. But in this case, when you're looking at government-owned property for government sale, like even if somebody finds out, there's no risk that the value, that they're going to mark the owner of that land's not marking up the price. Because they get a head start because they know that Google's interested in buying that land, which makes things a little different. And that's, I mean, this whole thing. And had this been a private acquisition of private land, and it also would have been a very, very different thing. So, what are your thoughts on the opposition? I know you're talking about Andrew getting out and protesting and yelling and screaming type of thing. Do you feel like the actions of the people that have opposed this, me, Christy Knowles, David Chadwick, the group with Advanced Etowah, and then of course the hundreds and thousands of citizens that have kind of chimed in. Some have chimed in with a lot of money, the interveners that have gotten involved with the lawsuits. Do you think it's been a good or a bad thing for our community?
So you're talking about personal opinion. I totally think it could have been handled differently. However, nobody's going to know because, as I told you earlier, I've told the people around the state, around the Southeast, they've never seen anything like this. So I'm not going to disparage anyone for what was done or how it was done. And, Andrew has his right to do it. But I look at myself as an elected official. My job is to resolve or solve a problem,
right?
Not go out there and cast stones. And again, I've had some conversations with him. I have conversations with a lot of people. Why did they want to be here? Why did they choose Gadsden? Why did they choose Etowah County? Some people knew, but most people didn't. It was bad. I'm on board. They weren't educated about it, and that's okay.
Okay.
But in the end, I wish Gadsden. And I tell you what, it's just like that email that was, my name's been in it. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. If I wrote an email and said, you're a communist, and I sent it out, does that make you a communist?
No.
Okay. So people interpret that I was for the plan. I never publicly or privately ever said I was for that plan. I said, I'm representing my constituents. And if you find me on tape or somebody that tells me that,
okay,
show it to me. But what should have happened is the city and or Pilgrim's Pride, they should have had an open forum to begin with. And a lot of this, the heartache, the divisiveness, you might have had some yelling and screaming and whatever if that had happened. But again, if they'd done that 1, 2, 3 times, because I've seen other projects that have got, if you're a quarry, landfill, now rendering plant, it's a very personal issue, the people that live near those places. And the bottom line is, the best way is, you talked about transparency. Yes, to a certain extent, but you have to get to a certain point before you can be transparent and let people know about it. I don't know the rules. I don't know the laws. Okay. So, I'm just giving you my perspective and my opinion.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, there were certainly plenty of citizens, plenty of people that jumped on. Of course, we tried our best to put actual information and actual stuff, and a lot of times you can lead a horse to water, but you certainly can't make them drink. And the world that we live in America today, there are plenty of people that jump on a bandwagon. Do you think that David Chadwick and Trent Thrasher, which were kind of the first two, Trent was the one that found out about the ADM permit requests. I mean, are they, are they putting the cart before the horse as they moved on? Or, I mean, I know we had conversations. I remember, out at the airport, we went out there and had those conversations. And, I don't remember things escalating irrationally.
Well, at that time, it wasn't. And I tell you, I've known David for, 20 years since I've been back. I just casually know Trent, but, we're not close friends. We're acquaintances.
Right.
But again, his perspective, I'm not sitting in his shoes. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what his perspective is, and I can't tell you what he was thinking. So I'm not going to say that he's good, bad, or indifferent, because he was looking at it in another way. I was looking at it as an elected official and trying to find, how do we solve this? And it took a year.
Well, and we'll wrap this up and move on. The Chadwicks endured months of paid advertising that were completely disparaging remarks.
Which was wrong.
And, we still have this past Tuesday, the city attorney and President Tolles and the city council in particular, saying that basically he's a white racist and that's why this has all been done. And, had it not been handled, that it's all been irrational. You've got the city attorney that is claiming that this is all irrational efforts by Christy Knowles, and her law firm, which I would also assume that means Phil Williams as well, and all the interveners, or somehow they've duped all of these people into having these irrational efforts. Do you what's your perception on all of that and what's occurring now?
Well, I can't speak for them because they have their perspective. But in the end, has it come to a close? No, because there's still lawsuits outstanding. The judge has to make some determinations. Have Pilgrim's Pride moved on? I haven't talked to them in 8 months, 7 months, something like that. And the person who was my main contact has now left. Would they come back here? I doubt it very seriously. Because what are they going to gain as a PR for their company? They have a bad enough PR as it is, as you well know.
Yep.
But how they handle it, I can't say I agree with it. But again, I'm not in their shoes, and I tell you what, some people were verbally accosted. Some people were, other things happened. And again, it's a shame that it got to this point. And for me I'm not going to condemn anybody, whether it's on the opposition side or pro-rendering plant side, because you just don't know. And everybody's got the right to their opinion. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I've got an opinion, but I don't share it because that's not what's important. It's what my constituents' opinions are.
All right.
And I don't mean to be a political answer, but that's truly how I think.
All right, let me jump through. All right, so this is I think Lance Corey has certainly in his efforts and concerns with the airport has earned the right to throw a question out there.
Sure.
What was the tipping point that made you come out from under your rock and oppose the rendering plant? That's his perspective.
Well, I'll address it. That's no problem. I tell you what, all along the way, I was talking again. The relationships I had with the Gadsden City Council, with the administration, with the airport authority. Not everybody, but there were 3 individuals that I talked to on the airport authority. I talked to at least 4 folks on the city council. I talked to the administration. Then I talked to people that when I went to games where my daughter was cheering, I would sit down and talk with people that were huge opposition folks. Mm-hmm. Well, in the end, it was so divisive. And it didn't matter if it had started last February, February a year ago, or is at the very end, because the relationships, I kept insinuating and telling these folks, I said, this is too divisive. It's splitting our city, our county, municipalities, it's splitting. And there was not some light bulb moment when I said that I, as he said, crawled out from under. Mm-hmm. And that's his perspective, and that's fine. But I tell you what, there were a lot of people against it. But again, there were a lot of people, and it might have, whether it was a 70-30, 60-40, 90-10, I can't tell you. Mm-hmm. But in the end, the best thing to do was to get this rendering plant issue over with. And unfortunately, it's still dragging on. And I tell you what, as we spoke earlier, Tyson is building a $208 million rendering plant in Coleman County where Hanceville is. And I've talked to the representatives and the senator there as soon as I found out of it, because I was asking them, please, can y'all talk to them and have a plant, something else? Well, I wish I had talked to Tyson, but I didn't. The bottom line is it will help. But in the future, there's still going to need to be another rendering plant, but it doesn't need to be in Etowah County. And that's my opinion, because I worked on trying to get it moved, and some people disagree with what my statements were, but show me where I said I wanted to move it somewhere else in Etowah County, because it truly would be interesting. Now let's talk about this. The old steel plant is zoned I-2.
Yep.
And the Caseys all along said they were not going to do it. But what would have happened if they did? There would have been lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. So the best thing to do is not bring it there. Let's move it somewhere else that's more rural. And it's more expensive the more rural you go, because you got to get the gas lines, the water, and the sewer. Those are the 3 key things. So the bottom line is it didn't need to be here, especially once you listen to the opposition, and whether they were fully informed or not, that was their opinion. It's like on a national scale. You've got the far right and the far left that control the narrative for the country. And you've got 60% to 65% that are close on what they think. But they're the silent majority. And can they do anything about that? Because the money, the media, they control it. That's part of the big lobbying effort. So, taking it and comparing it to Washington, that's what it is. So.
Well, so I will humbly disagree with that analysis based on the number of people. And while if you did it by population base, that there's probably some legitimate figuring in there. And obviously I'm skewed in perspective because I'm sitting here doing this, and but I think when you really narrow it down to when you've got the vast majority, I'm comfortable saying that, of business owners, of other community leaders, I don't think there's some silent majority that, and it's interesting to hear the word divisive, because it's only divisive from a lot of people's perspective, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's divisive against a very, very small number of people. Meanwhile, there's a majority of people, and there are plenty. Absolutely. I work with plenty of people that are just like, I just want to talk about football. You know, I want to move on. But I don't put them in the opposite. And the reality is that the way a community runs, that's the way the reality is. When you look at 35,000 people in the city of Gadsden or ish, you know, and only 6,000 ish show up to vote. So that, you know, that, and that's a shame, but the reality is that, so realistically, if 5,900 of those people are against the rendering plant and, you know, there's only 100 left that might be for it, that doesn't mean that whatever the math in public of whatever's left, 29,000 people, you know, that they are some silent majority, but
yeah, I mean, on the perspective, I was just using far right, far right. I know. I don't know if it was 90-10 or if it was 60.
I know what you're, and really the point I'm trying to make is I think, you know, to put it simply, I think it was far more, from my perspective, far more 90-10, or 95-5, you know, and I just don't know anybody, you know, and there were. Yeah. So, anyways, well, just for consideration with all that, and I fully recognize I'm not out talking to everybody, and there's plenty of people that don't want to talk to me because I'm sitting here with a camera in my face.
Well, the question would be, I had so many people come to me, and I'm not saying it's thousands because I mean it's hard to talk to that many people. They said we will not publicly come out and say anything because we're afraid about the public scrutiny for supporting the rendering plant. And they were more in the minority than the people that were against it. But again, people, they just didn't want to voice their opinion publicly.
I get that. And I have said all along, you know, I think the simple way to look at that is that there was an overwhelming majority, and we had a very different style of conversation than has ever been had in this community. And that we as a community, you know, everything else is going to be much more 60-40, 30-70, 50-50. Every other issue that we deal with is going to be far more down the middle. And we've got to figure out how to have legitimate conversation between elected officials and citizens and other citizens. And a lot of it also boils down to what I've really want to see is the citizens have got to stay more informed, you know, and they need to understand who they're choosing. I'm one of those people. You know, had I been as aware, you know, in 2012 when I settled here and I'd stayed more in tune, you know, I probably would have, you know, maybe figured out that the IDA was structured in a really bad way that kind of set things up to, you know, I mean, all the things that it was, you know, we talk about military aviation and aviation in general, that Swiss cheese effect, all these problems that come together and you have this perfect storm, and that's how you end up with an aircraft mishap. You know, and that's kind of the way I view the rendering plant, you know, and I hope that it scared people to the point that they go, I need to pay attention. I need to do research, which is why we're putting the candidate profile page together to try and make it easy for people to get to know you guys, to learn who you are, you know, and you know, become more educated on the issues. I'm certainly not an expert on very many things, if anything, but you know, I do my best, and I'm trying to learn.
I'm right there with you, but I tell you what, something I have learned along the way is the more you listen, the more you learn. When you're talking all the time, you don't learn something. So I try to listen a lot.
Well, I and it may, because I'm here on a microphone, look like I listen or that I talk a lot, but
that's what you're here.
But the reality is that when
I didn't mean to
I know, but when you only do 2 lives a week, guess how much more listening I do. You know, I've learned. I mean, that's what I did in the military, was not try to be the expert, but to bring a bunch of people that are experts into a room and listen to them and figure out how to formulate a plan. So. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about leadership, because that is also one of the fundamental problems that I think has frustrated me in all of this, and not I'm not pointing that at you, but in general, as a community, in seeing leadership, or at least what I envision as leadership and what I'm used to out of military leaders, business leaders. I think that's a very strong consideration that people need to look at. And I'm glad, and I'm sure you're one that would say that, you're not just an elected official, that it's a lot more to it than that. So, but what I want to ask is, why do you think you are a leader? Why people should trust your leadership, and put their faith in you going and leading our community down in Montgomery?
Good question. I will say that, again, because of my relationships, the ones I've developed locally, the ones I've developed in Montgomery, the local officials, but a lot of local constituents, listen, this past, what's today, Thursday? I've probably handled 20 things with constituents, individually.
Okay.
I've probably had 10 different things from municipalities and the county that I've dealt with. And that's not all the time, but things just happened a lot this week. And I could try to call. My cell phone is published. My phone in my office in Montgomery is forwarded to my cell phone. I'm accessible. People send me Messenger all the time if they don't have they can find me on Facebook. I don't go out and tout what I do. I tell you what, maybe I've made a mistake not going out and beating my chest of things that I've done over the past 4 years. But that's not truly who I am, because I'm just trying to do the right thing, trying to help our local constituents. And I tell you what, I'm hoping in the next month, 2 months, 6 months, a culmination of working with people to help Etowah County. I told you earlier, there's some big things that should be coming up and announced, but I can't talk about it because until the writing's on the pad, you can't talk about it. But
we've heard a lot of people talk around about it, so I hope it comes to fruition.
Well, I'm working with an employer, which would be not only a shot in the arm, it'd be like a bazooka in your arm. That's how big it could be. And even if, let's just say, I don't get reelected, would I still help and do that? Yes, because why? Because it helps Etowah County. It could help growth, and it would provide better jobs. That's the bottom line. And I'm not some rocket scientist. I'm trying to do what's right. And in politics, that's not always the right thing.
Okay. So what has prepared you to lead? What have you done? I realize, to say, which it's a funny political statement, because everybody kind of says it, that I don't want to tout my, and I get, genuine humility and leadership. And a lot of times a good leaders is it's hard for them to see the good things that they do. But certainly come campaign season, every politician suddenly is all about talking about all the great things they've done.
That's right.
So, that's kind of the double-edged sword of doing that. So I don't know if you've got any other thoughts on what makes you.
I tell you what is a good leader that takes their own opinion and goes out and touts and says, this is what we're going to do. Because in the state house, I've seen that from some representatives and some senators, and it's not a good thing. You learn by listening, you learn by implementing, you learn by solving or bringing an issue to the forefront. And I'm one of those. I've actually been dealing with a couple of organizations and associations, the Zoom calls. I've got 10 people on the Zoom calls, and we've got everybody at the table. And you get everybody at the table. And if you come away in those situations where nobody's happy, but nobody's just mad about it, you've probably done good for your job. Okay. So that's how I think a leader should do, is to help bring people together.
All right. Well, that's a fair enough answer and a fair enough perspective. So, all right. So let's move on to government structure, which again, back to, that was kind of a foundational issue born out of that a lot of us got informed about. The airport authority is one that has become obviously a hotbed topic. Again, things that I can't really understand how it never came to be, and it's not necessarily the current board's fault, but how you would ever form an airport authority structure and not have any requirement for some percentage or some seats that have aviation experience. And if you've got the aviation, particularly the land-based and management side of things, I'm sure you've seen. It's also not good to have everyone in the room be, a pilot or an aviator. That can also be bad. So I'm not trying to say that, but that was one that which a lot of us involved in aviation for years of like, what are we doing? Why would you even do that? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And then, the IDA is another specific one that came out. The judge ruled that it's a private institution, or a private company basically, and that they're not subject to, FOIA requests, and basically they're not beholden to anyone, to provide information. And that is one that seems concerning, that they clearly are acting on behalf of the government. They are an arm of acting, and so again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a very experienced politician, but I'm a common sense guy going that just doesn't pass a sniff test. So as a whole, what I'm really kind of getting at is what do you view as the government structure? Those are specifics. The other aspect of what we've talked about, and I've said it multiple times, if I was a military campaign guy trying to conduct operations in Etowah County, and I put 13, 12, 11 generals in this small a geographic space, it would be over before we started. And so what do you view from the very nature of how our government is set up, moving us forward and making things happen?
I tell you what, there have been conversations about going to a municipal government.
Mm-hmm.
You have 11 municipalities,
mm-hmm.
and not a single one's going to want to relinquish
absolutely
their throne of their power where they are.
Absolutely.
And it has to do with many variables.
Hey, once you get that rice bowl, you don't want to give away that rice bowl.
Right. Yeah. So it's figuring out how to participate with each other. And I think that, Rainbow City and Gadsden have a decent relationship, Etowah, Sardis City, some talk more than others, but the bigger, the people that bring in the revenue, which is going to be hierarchy, is going to be Gadsden, Rainbow City, probably Etowah, and then stepping down from there, Glencoe and Oaks Bluff, South Side, and I don't know exactly where they fall, but, actually I have a meeting with the mayor. I'm going to the mayor's meeting tonight. We've got some great mayors, and again, they're working together. It's not a perfect relationship, but I tell you what, it's come a long way from when I left town. It was a different ball game. It really was from my perspective. Mm-hmm. Now, I was a young person, so I looked at it differently. Now I look at things in a different manner.
Mm-hmm.
But from a structure, let's just go to the Gadsden Airport Authority. I think it was under Steve Means' administration where it changed. It was a department under the
right.
And then it changed.
Yep.
Was that right? I don't know. Was politics involved? I don't know. Now, we have a new administration. Don't know who's going to be the mayor, but they will have that opportunity to address that. And will they do it because of what they think, or going out to the public and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what the authority is of the airport authority. If they came under the city as a department, this would be their authority. And I would have the city council might have more control. I don't know, because those are the things that have to be answered.
Okay.
And let's talk about the IDA. IDA, look around the state, see how it's set up compared to other industrial development authorities. It really, you have one etity that funds most of it. It's Gadsden,
mm-hmm.
but it should be Etowah
mm-hmm.
County,
yep.
all the municipalities.
Pay your fair share.
Yep. But again, it's difficult because some of those smaller communities don't make enough revenue to participate on a pro rata share.
Right.
So, again, it's working with what you have. And should it be a public entity? I don't know. And that's for either the new administration or somebody else to look at and evaluate and see what's best. I'm a huge feasibility study person. I said, give me an independent, unbiased study. Tell me what's best. And those aren't for free. But again, they tell you and give you options, and then you can make your determination from that.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Then, all right, let me jump in and see if there's anything. A lot of the same comments. All right. I'll jump through some of these things towards the end. Let's move on. I think we'll move on to infrastructure, which is kind of in line as we talk about the IDA and the government structure and how we. So infrastructure is another piece of the rendering plant. The extreme concern. Obviously we all got to know the Coosa River Keepers. They were very informative and very level-headed environmental group, trying to speak out for the river. At least that's my perspective as I've gotten to know them, and sharing the concerns with the sewage infrastructure. And I always take the opportunity to remind everybody, if you do see sewage overflows, those SSOs, then get the photos, get the documentation, and get it to them.
Call, whether it's Coosa River Keepers, but call the Water Authority, because whether it's at Etowah, whether it's in Gadsden, whether it's in Rainbow City, if they don't know about it, they can't solve the problem. And I've had a lot of conversations with different water authorities, and they get hit from the side. If they'd known about it, they might have been able to address it. I'm not saying that they're going to be perfect or do it right every time, because, hey, we're all human. And again, somebody might think they're not doing enough, and that's their right. So stay on top of it.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I think they've known, it's taken an extreme to really push the ball forward for them. And I know there's work being done to fix some of the, but I mean, from listening to, as I've gotten to know people in East Gadsden, that I never would have known and never would have become aware of the issues in East Gadsden. And people lost Christmas presents this year because of sewage backup. They've been screaming about that for years. And it is frustrating. And I'll give it that infrastructure issues across the country is an issue.
We just passed part of the ARP, American Rescue Plan funds from the feds, whether good, bad, or indifferent. We got $1 billion, $1.1 billion, but we dedicated, I think it was $225 million for water sewer issues. But most of that's going to go to places that are, you think East Gadsden's bad? There are places all over the state that are awful. And it's to really help go fund that. And we're going to be having another special session either August or September dealing with additional funds. And I guarantee you some of it will go into infrastructure. And as soon as we passed that legislation, I started calling every water authority, go talk to your ADM, go talk to your ADM people, go talk to them, because, because what's going to happen though, the feds have put, a 5-year limit on it. It's going to take 10 to 15 because there are only so many people that can do it. There's only so many supplies. So, and it's just like presently, locally, the SSOs that take place, there have been, I know the Gas and Water Authority spent a couple $1 million to solve some problems, but it didn't solve everything by a long shot. And it would take it would take a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately we're seeing, and not asking you to comment on this. I'm just gonna take the opportunity to say, it doesn't, as bad as the problem is to invest $1.2 million or whatever will end up being in new business space in the venue, vice, diverting that money into, it's obviously it's a complex discussion, but
it's actually separate entities. You get the Water Authority and you get the City of Gas.
Yeah, but it's still city dollars.
Water Authority, I'll defer to her, but Water Authority operates separately now. Listen, there have been people that have been on city council, and they're on that Water Authority. So they are intermingled, but you've got people from the outside too. But
they're very much intermingled now. But now that they appointed a bunch of city council.
Well, you're talking about municipal and infrastructure. This is just an idea, and people will say you're crazy, but I would love to see Gadsden, Rainbow City, Etowah, and a few of the others come together, because it's always been mine. But I think if you could do economies of scale and figure it out and let some separate entity come in and say, okay, this is how we're going to split this stuff up. But again, I think economy of scale would help save money in the long run. And that's one place I think that we could do it, but it's a lot of discussion because you're going to have a lot of different opinions.
Yeah. Well, so what is your idea of kind of the priority of infrastructure and what we need to be thinking about infrastructure wise? Obviously to repair, but also to prepare for the world of the future.
Well, the first thing we need is it has to do with roadways and bridges. It truly does, because from a chain supply management and a distribution standpoint, that would help us. And the two biggest projects are the Eastern Connector and the South Side Bridge. And I know people talk about Megan Boulevard. It's in bad shape, but it's a ranking on where, because there are only so many dollars. And I said the other day, if you took every single road and bridge and replaced it in the state of Alabama, it would cost $400 billion is the projection. And we're spending 1.1 to 1.2 billion a year, even with the new Rebuild Alabama money.
Right.
That's less than 0.25%.
Right.
I mean, so it's hard to do what you need to do to make, because you get potholes, you get, I've tried to help people that they've bent their rims on something on Megan Boulevard. Sometimes jumping through those hoops and getting it replaced or done, and it takes months and months working with the DOT. It's possible, but it's just not like they turn around and write you a check. You have to prove it. You have to do this. But the bottom line is that if we have Eastern Connector, we can relieve a lot of Megan Boulevard. If we have the South Side Bridge, it helps from a distribution and chain supply management from, the 1-tier, 2-tier, 3-tier suppliers that are going to Honda. Or if we can use the mega site and develop something there, getting people, if you're coming from, western central Georgia, which way would you come? Those type of things. Because again, if you have the roadway and the bridge infrastructure, that's the first start. Now, I'll tell you what, the ultimate goal, like on broadband, statewide,
right?
We, I think, put $278 million toward it as a state using those. Do you know how much, if you really wanted to get everybody on even level playing field with fiber optics, it would take about $8 billion to do that. And that's a projection. So if they say $8 billion, it's going to cost $10 billion. And it's a difficult thing. So what we're trying to do is you manage what you have and you try to help the people that are more in need. A lot of the folks in the rural areas, they need more help than anybody, in my opinion. So, from that standpoint.
All right. Well, let's move on to one of the, I guess I'd say somewhat oddball issues that popped up, and that's the first responders. Just in the awareness and people paying attention through the rendering plant, it really kind of came to light, the issue that we've got with first responders. And, obviously every politician, at least in Alabama, is going to say that they support, the first responders and military. Very thankful that I live in a state that doesn't want to necessarily defund anybody or deal with those issues. And it's truly the discussion that we've got here is that, we're borderline going to fall behind on advanced life-saving capabilities. And we're going to risk the fact that somebody's family is going to have an emergency and nobody's going to show up when they make the phone call, or it's going to take a lot longer than it should to get there. I'll just anecdotally sat at a Southside game. I guess it was before COVID, and one of the players got injured, and one of the bus that was there got called away just minutes before he got injured, and then we sat there and watched for 45 minutes. I think they ended up having to get a bus out of Ohatchee to come and get them, and we're fortunate that we have a community where we've got some orthopedic surgeons and smart guys that can get out there and help hold the fort down. But that was one of those, and I don't know 100% if that was directly related. I definitely think it's related to the numbers game that we've got going on. But what are your thoughts on our first responder issues, the recruitment retention here in the community, and the importance and the role that plays in business attracting and business development. What are your thoughts?
First responders, law enforcement and firemen. Let's talk about that in EMS. The city of Gadsden, I think that their payroll is approximately 70% of their budget. And I think other municipalities are around 60 because it should be lower. But, Gadsden is not only the county seat, it's a regional seat. We only have 34,000 plus people that live here now, so it's continuing to get smaller and smaller. Mm-hmm. I live in downtown Gadsden, and I love it. I mean, I really do. But from the standpoint of we are not able to pay our first responders, our law enforcement, enough to be, I think Rainbow City pays their firemen more. So what the city of Gadsden has to do, and it's going to come under this next administration, but I've been talking with several council people. They're trying to come up with ideas to get the money to help fund the police and the firemen, because I was told by one that it takes $30,000 to train a fireman. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he leaves and goes somewhere else, and that municipality doesn't have to train them because they're already trained, they're certified. Right. So the city, have to look at things differently and figure out how do we retain. And even if you can retain, folks going into fire and law enforcement are going down lower and lower because of, you can get out and do something else and you don't have that pressure, but it takes a special person to do both. And I'm talking about a good person. And we as a community, and it's not just Gadsden, but all around, we have to look at insurance rates. Mm-hmm. It's like volunteer fire departments. The volunteer fire department participation is going down because there are a lot of folks, it is a passion for them and they're volunteering. Mm-hmm. But getting younger folks to get in, they just don't have that interest. And I don't know how you develop that, but hopefully along the way, because if those volunteer fire departments go away, and you have to come further, your insurance rates go up. And I mean, I hate to put it in a monetary amount, but that's what ends up happening.
That's the truth.
And it affects business as well.
Yep.
Gadsden has a good presence, out near the airport where there's a lot of industrial people. But, there are other parts of the city that don't have the presence, and it's a...
So I understand that they shut down that firehouse out at the airport fairly regularly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't even know that.
From talking that's one of the, that's one of the to try and because of their manning mitigation. That's my understanding from talking to, the Gadsden firefighters that I know.
They would know, definitely.
But yeah, I mean that's definitely. The numbers game, and again, I don't want you're not. So let's jump to the state level,
okay?
Because I don't want you to necessarily tell us exactly what you think Gadsden needs to do. But what's the state level? What can you do from the state level with that might impact, or how much how much can you do?
Well, as the old saying is, bring the bacon home.
Okay,
but a lot of times what you have to do is, do you bring it directly to us? But you actually have to wait your turn, except relationships play a role in that. And I tell you what, over the last 4 years, I've developed a lot of relationships. I know a lot of department heads. I mean, I know people well. Mm-hmm. And I spend time down there developing those relationships. I'm on a couple committees, and I've got a lot of great relationships with a lot of senators, 95% of the House. And that's what it takes. And with the working staff, the leadership. But again, trying to get those dollars back to Etowah County, that's the ultimate goal. But if that dollar's more needed in Marshall County, should I stand in the way of them getting it? No. Now, in politics, a lot of people saying, heck no, we want it. I don't care what they do, because but I tell you what, if there was a project here locally, it wasn't in my district, and I told the DOT, I said, I understand that. That's really more important. But in the end, both projects were done because somebody else dropped out. But I look at it, what's best for everyone overall, that's what we need to do. But again, as people evaluate how good you're on how much money you bring back, what you bring back to the cities, the municipalities, and to the county. And I will say this. Etowah County had an issue. There was $1.3 million and the CAO, how do we get this? And it was the tail end of funding from some of the original funds. We ultimately succeeded in helping the county, and they were the second to last to receive, and it was like $100 million total, but they were the last ones to receive funding. So because of our contacts and the people we talked to, we knew what to do. We advised the county what to do, and in the end, they were reimbursed for that. And they thought they were going to, oh my God, we're going to be out $1.3 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All right. So let's we'll jump to the other one that's kind of a little out of the norm, or at least a lot of folks would think is out of the norm in a discussion about business development, business growth, but education, and education in our community. Where do you feel we stand? And we've had a lot of conversations about how important solid education system is to business attractant. Particularly when you're talking about the companies that are the as you put it, the bazookas, to getting growth and development. I mean, they're looking at that, right? Whether it's moving in their own people to a community that those people want to live in, or certainly workforce development. What are your perspectives on where we stand as a county? And your thoughts from looking at it from the state level, moving forward with our education system?
Well, we've had the largest funded education trust fund budget ever. Now, money doesn't solve it all, but it helps. But again, there are many things, because really education should be the number one priority for any state, any municipality, any county, because if you can get your children educated and provide them, whether it's a trade, whether it's a community college, whether it's a college degree. Workforce development that's a huge, huge part of the future. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about career tech.
Right.
We're close at Gadsden State of getting a workforce development facility, and it's going to be state of the art because it's going to be brand new. I've been participating and helping with it. It's not just me. There are a lot of people that have been part of the process. The community college, they bear most of the weight on, for what's happening because they've got some good people there working on it. But I guess education, just like on workforce development, having dual enrollment in all three school systems that said they'll get their students over for this workforce development. They'll also be able to take community college classes as well. So they'll be ahead of the curve. And I've been working with some business leaders throughout the state. They're going like, we need to not only do high school, we need to move it down to middle school, down to 7th and 8th grader. Introduce, because there are a lot of kids. I was actually at a location today, and they were talking to me about, plumbing and pipe fitting and things like that. Mm-hmm. Unless you're exposed to it, you don't know it's there. So if you can expose this child who's in the 7th grade to, it's like Worlds of Work that's over in Oxford. That's a wonderful thing because they can see, the different things they're capable of doing, and they may not choose any of those. They might go to the 4-year college. They might do something else, but at least they understand and they're exposed to it, so they can decide if they want to try to go in that direction. And listen, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think from an educational standpoint, we're great, but we're still performing on the lowest level of any state. And again, there are reasons why for that, but we can't say but because of this. We have a lot of students that are tested that are Hispanic, mm-hmm. that can't teach English, and they're taking English and stuff. It's hard to teach them. And
right.
So it's taking them out of the overall score, which will have a reflection on, are we really doing better than we think we are? But I tell you, it's a concerted and ongoing effort of trying to figure out, it's just like charter schools, mm-hmm. private schools, homeschool. How does everybody fit together? What's the best avenue? There are experts that are on both sides of the issue. And again, doing nothing is not the right thing. But again, I've talked with the state superintendent a lot. Eric's a good guy. He's from, I think it's Sandrock, up in Cherokee County. Yeah, he's doing the best he can, but a lot of people are going, you're not doing good enough. So we need performance. And again, money is not the only thing, but it helps a lot. And it's figuring out how to, whether it's merit raises, whether it's, you got a lot of teachers that I tell you what, there were some people that said during COVID that the teachers did nothing. And I took offense to that because I knew what my daughter's teachers were doing, and they worked their tail off. And a lot of older teachers left because of the IT side of things. They just couldn't deal with it. It was stressful and overwhelming. But, right now, we passed the budget, or actually passed a bill where we're trying to retain some of the veteran teachers. We've bumped their pay up a great deal, but they deserve it, in my opinion. But we need to go back on the bottom level and not have them going to Georgia to teach.
Right.
It's figuring it out, where we can stay on the same level as Georgia or Tennessee or even Florida, Mississippi. So.
Well, I'll leave it to Danny Starnes for a smart aleck comment. But validity and just I don't want to turn this into a huge discussion about this, but he just said, I guess Texas has no Hispanics, in how we figure and measure. And I don't know that was necessarily
that's a good point. And
I don't know that was necessarily the point of what you were trying to say.
It's not because listen, they have a tremendous number of Hispanics. Maybe they've learned to deal with it. I don't know. That would be interesting to look at and see, because
if you know anybody interested in a house, I'm going to have one for sale in South Texas here in about a month. So I was stationed down there for 3 years, and I'm trying to get rid of a house down there. So it'll probably get sold to a Hispanic.
Well, good time to sell.
Yes. That's
a great time to sell.
That's my hope. All right. Well, again, good. Valid point in that discussion, I think, Danny, and how we, try to look into, data points can always be skewed to tell a story that you want to tell. And sometimes that can be very hard. Certainly, I think we've all experienced that through, the last year with, whether, when you look at statistics and understanding of what's going on with COVID or any other issue that we've got, a lot of people really don't understand how to look at the statistics and have the perspective of, well, where did that data come from and how much should I just trust that stuff? So, all right. So master planning, we've kind of, walked around that circle. And I think, what are your thoughts on how do we move forward? It sounds like you are saying that we need to figure out a way to move forward together. All the municipalities, what are your thoughts on a no kidding formalized master plan? How, again, from the state level, state perspective, what do you think you can do to help facilitate that and make that to, actually come to fruition in our lifetime?
It's called funds.
Okay.
And I tell you what, it's going to ADECA, whether it's through grants, whether we have private business or businesses participating in wanting to donate to the cause. And again, there are different ways to accomplish something. But again, getting everybody together. Now, would every single municipality want a full master plan for the county? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That's a discussion to have. But Gadsden surely needs one. I think that Rainbow City has done one within the last 5 years.
He's working on one now, and Southside is as well.
So they're taking the steps. So it's going to be the next administration, but I think that's going to be one thing, because however many people we have running, I guarantee you most would say we've got to figure out what our direction is. And if we can bring in new industry, how can we help the folks that are in poverty or living a lower standard? Mm-hmm. How can we help them? Because if they do well, that means everybody does well. Mm-hmm. So, but I think a master plan for Gadsden, definitely. You already have two separately, but even the county doing a master plan. But again, it's finding the funds, figuring out how to do it, but hiring professionals to do it. Don't do it internally, because get the people that are trained to do it. And I do know it is not cheap.
Right.
So,
right. Well, anything that helps you, for lack of better words, make money, typically those skill sets are pretty valuable, and worth investing in. So that also means they're not cheap. So
that's correct.
All right. All right. Hal Murphy's chiming in. Hispanic students are typically amongst the hardest working and most respectful students in schools. I hope everybody doesn't beat you up on the Hispanic comment. I don't think you meant it from
not
that
in a,
that
not
way,
in a
but
bad way. It's just,
yeah.
I tell you what, there was some legislation brought by a fellow House member who's a good friend of mine up in Russell County. They have a tremendous number of non-English speaking students, and the legislation he brought dealt with trying to take that into consideration about from a scoring standpoint, because you get money from feds and everywhere else based on scores. And listen, am I an expert at this? No. And I even know much about it? No. But again, it was just an example of what, so listen, I guarantee you there are a lot of you out there that know 100 times more than I do about the subject.
Hal Murphy is certainly an experienced. Okay, so Danny Starnes again with a very pointed question to lead us right into the last topic, which is the business environment. Certainly we've seen, you talked about the population that has moved out of Gadsden, businesses that have moved out of Gadsden, the business owners that I've met and talked to, and albeit they're not a sampling of 100% of them, but there's so many stories of, despite the environment of Gadsden, I've managed to build a business, or I wouldn't touch trying to build a business in Gadsden with a 10-foot pole. And obviously in the greater community of Etowah County, I don't want to, certainly now there's a narrative that is being pushed, very loudly on Tuesday morning by the Gadsden City Council, that all of us that have been yelling and screaming, so to speak, that have opposed this rendering plant are the reason that businesses are not moving into this area, which is laughable to me, given that we've had decades of lack of growth long before any discussion about the rendering plant. So I'm not really, that's not what's stopping, but that's just my perspective. But how do we, so Danny said, how do we increase funds? Because you're talking about money, how do we get the money to do all these things? And I think, I don't think anybody would argue that obviously we need to grow outside money coming in, and grow a better business, environment, and grow what we have, encourage new development, and then not, ultimately also bring in other outside businesses. What are your thoughts on where we stand as a county, as a whole, and what you see at the state level?
I think the state's done a very good job about bringing outside of the state growth, bring it in. We're supposed to have 500,000 new workers trained. It's going to be impossible because we don't have the population to do it. But locally, we have to become more business friendly. We need to solve their problems instead of, all right, this, drawing a line saying, if you didn't pay this, you're going to have to pay a fine. We need to figure out, hey, how can we have open arms and welcome these businesses? And it's not just Gadsden, it's a lot of places, and even around the state. It's around everywhere. But again, the more business friendly we can become, the better it is. But that's just laying the foundation. And then actually in the legislature, I've been talking with a lot of people about, from a licensing standpoint, for many things, how it's done. And it's a nightmare for a business. Every year they have to, do this, this, and this. If you are the same and you don't change to the next year, now if your employee numbers change, you might have to submit. Why not just have a one form? It's going, and I'm oversimplifying, but no changes. And that takes that week or 3 days that they were putting paperwork together, even though it's almost identical to last year. They were having to make new numbers. Let's make it, again, business friendly. And the problem is laws are meant for the 1%, 2%, 3% that break the laws, but the 97% of the folks are having to suffer because of it, that are doing things right. So let's be business friendly. And again, working conjointly together, we can help accomplish that. But, I've heard complaints about every municipality on different things. And some people have bad days when they're working for a city and they're just going like, God, here's another thing. But I mean, we've got a lot of great folks that work in these municipalities and the county. But I think that's what we need to try to do. Just have an overall overhaul of how we look at business instead of it's a revenue. Let's look at it. Hey, they're contributing to our community. Let's support them and let's make things easier for them to operate. But staying in with the realms of, federal law, state law, things like that, not going outside of that.
Right. Well, okay. Well, that wraps up. I think there are a couple of folks that had some questions that are probably square in the realm of House representation. Why do you support the fuel tax increase and oppose the fuel tax moratorium?
I actually ran on the infrastructure, and without infrastructure, you don't have economic development. Now, let's take, it was 1992 or 4 when the last tax was added. It was 18 cents. You know what that's worth now? 9 or 8 cents. So we're trying to solve today's problems without that. And I actually call the gas tax a user fee. If you use it, you should pay for it. A good fiscal conservative should say, I use it, I need to bear my portion of it. If we did not have this Rebuild Alabama, it was like 800 to 900 million. This only adds about 350 to 400 million. I guarantee you, Rainbow Drive would not have been paved. 411 going north would not have been done without the Rebuild Alabama. And people are always going to find, it's like Megan right now, it's in bad shape. And I need to call the DOT, my contacts there, and say, where are we on the list? Because roads are like that all over the state, that there are problems. On the perpetual or the index, on that index, if we'd taken from 2018 and gone back 14 years, the gas tax would have actually been 2 cents less. Now, because of what has happened with inflation and everything, it might go up 2 cents, but in 2 years, if things go back down and settle down, it can go back because it's every 2 years it's evaluated. And I'm not saying it's perfect or right or wrong, but I tell you what, we were in a situation from the early 90s to now where there was no, inflation, cost of living, et cetera. Gas tax the same way. And I know that Georgia gave a reprieve for 3 months, but you know why they could do it? They had $1 billion surplus. They had $4 billion in reserve, and they only have one budget. We have 2 budgets. Most of the money goes to Education Trust Fund. Our general budget, it's 91% earmarked. It leaves us 9% to deal with. And if we had tried to give a vacation for 2 months, for an average driver, drives 15,000 miles a year, averages 20 miles a gallon, it's $1.40 a week is, I think that and I don't mean to break it down to that smaller terms, but that's still money. And to some people, it's a lot of money, because if you do it through the year, it adds up. But again, if you're using the roads, and I tell you what, ask the county commissioners what they've been able to do with Rebuild Alabama compared to where they were 4 years ago.
We have a long conversation about how that money is divided up amongst the county commissioners. It's something I've learned in the recent weeks. But
I will say this: the 6 years prior to me coming in, they paved 57 miles of road in the county. Since Rebuild Alabama has come in, it's 107 miles, and a lot of it's Rebuild Alabama. It's 100% used for roads, bridges, and infrastructure.
Okay.
The rest of the money, there is one caveat. There's a $32 million that goes to court system to support that. But tickets, but everything.
Stinking lawyers.
Yeah, well said. So that's why I voted for it. But I tell you what,
I'm getting the evil eye, guys. So,
well, if we don't have that, we don't do this Eastern Connector. Right. We don't have the South Side Bridge. We can't get Meagan Boulevard done because we're going to be way even further down on the list.
Well, I'm a big fan of the judicial system because I feel like we don't have a rendering plant coming to the Gadsden Airport because of it. So let's I think, guys, we've been going long enough. There were a few other questions. I do apologize if we haven't if I haven't jumped in there. I think we covered most of the big points. I would encourage you to jump in the comments on the Facebook page and see if there's anything else that you feel like you might want to address. But there's only so much. I think on any of these one topics we could talk for hours and hours and hours. The point of this is try to hit some high points. And really what I want to do is encourage everybody go to all the candidate profiles. Check out, again, I can't emphasize it enough. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. If you're not a hardcore political follower and all that kind of stuff, if you never pay attention, if you can spend 6 minutes, you can get on that website and learn some stuff, and easy links to everybody. And hopefully wherever they are, what you're doing on your Facebook and social and your website, that you've got some good information. Of course, we've got other links to other documents that have been pushed through this last year, and we've all found out about other places to find all sorts of information that goes on in our state government that most of us would never have known about. The ADEM permitting process and keeping an eye on all of that. So, but guys, please head over to advancedetowah.com. Check on the election 22. You can get in there, and we've got all the information that we can find. And certainly, if you've got more, then shoot me a message, and we'll see what else might need to be added in there. So, Mr. Isbell, thanks for coming in and having a chat. I guess all that's left is say have a good evening now.
That's right.
And thanks for the time. I know you're busy. Are you going to be out at? I guess we got First Friday coming up here in a couple of weeks.
I'll be there. I'll be at the Ram Clinic this weekend for part of the time.
Okay.
My brother and nephew are dentists, and I tell you what, folks, it's going to be the first Ram Clinic in this state, and it's going to be dental, medical, vision, I think even hearing. And I mean, it's a wonderful thing. A lot of people that are coming in, it's free. So, if you need a tooth pulled, and I don't know what the qualifications are, you sign up prior, I have no clue, but it's going to be something good. And I think we'll have a lot of state leaders that come by here. And even if they don't, this is a great thing.
Well, I know some low qualified mechanics that I'm sure be able to pull teeth for free. So
I always offer rusty pliers.
Yes. So what's your preferred way for folks to get in touch with you and reach out to you if they want to?
Listen, I tell you, I'm a public official. I look at things differently. You can publish my telephone number, my personal email. And I tell you what, I'm so busy, I'm not kidding. He sent me an email, and it took me a day and a half, and he had to text me to remind me to do that. And that's my fault. But I work, I have a family, and I'm trying to do legislative stuff, and I'm actually working on some really good things. But again, it's finding the time to respond. It might take me a day, 2 days, even 3 days. I mean, I've gone 5 days without checking my emails, and that's a nightmare. But it's just, I either have to get up at 5 and do it, but I go to bed at 10 or 11. There's only so much you can do in a day.
All right.
But feel free to, I'm serious, to publish my telephone number, my email.
Whatever you've given me, we'll put it out there. So, we'll do that. Again, guys, thanks so much for watching. I would certainly, I guess I would end with encouraging you to consider, as you talk about folks that you discussed with behind the scenes with the rendering plant, that is so much more the issues of the transparency of how things are conducted around here. It is so much more the core of the issue that has been discussed, and it becomes so important, that it was so exaggerated. And so, I'm sure you're going to do what you feel is best to do. All I can do is try and encourage all politicians don't be scared to share all the information. And if we can't have conversations out in the public, it's very, it's alarming. We'll do the best we can. And I realize that every conversation won't be had in public. And, as you touched on, the rendering plant is an extreme, exaggerated exception to the way things normally go. I've had that conversation with a politician yesterday, privately, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. And so extreme times, extreme things require extreme measures, which is why I'm sitting here doing this. This is certainly not what I would have wanted to do a year and a half ago.
But you've learned a lot, haven't you?
I have learned a lot, and I've also upped my dosage of blood pressure medication. So with that, again, I appreciate you coming in and having a good conversation. And guys, at the end of the day, we as a community have got to pay attention. We've got to listen. We've got to get educated. The ultimate leadership that we have in this community comes from us as citizens, period. If we're not offering the leadership to our elected officials by whether we choose them or how we communicate to them, then we're not doing our part as the system is established and set up. So
one point I would like to make: get out and vote.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in my district there are 47, right around 47.5, right in that, and I think 14,000 people get out and vote. I mean, that is your right.
Yep.
And you should exercise your right, no matter, just it is a right, and it is an important right. You can sit at home and complain about a lot of things, but that is something you can be proactive about and vote.
And do it on May 24th, because whoever makes it through May 24th, that's who we're electing out of those primaries. So don't write them off as just a primary. If you don't vote there, then you're not going to get a chance to actually exercise your right to vote, because there'll only be one name on the ballot. So, guys, again, thanks. Sorry for going so late into the evening. I hope basketball and all the other fun stuff is not already done. So thank you. We'll get out of here, guys. Y'all have a great evening, and we'll